It's Vicky and Alex tap dancing onto your screens. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Vicky, and hello to everyone else.
Yeah, this is really interesting because we were just like Alex was like, oh, I can interview you, and I was like, that would be great. And then I entirely forgot about the whole process, and so now I'm like, where is this interview going to sit? Somewhere on LinkedIn, somewhere on YouTube, somewhere on my website, and somewhere on all of your things as well, maybe.
Absolutely, absolutely. It can sit wherever it wants. It can sit on a throne. It can do whatever it wants.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do this. Let's chat about all things creativity, writing, and maybe the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Absolutely. A reference to your brilliant post today, a parody of that famous or infamous rap, of course.
Thank you. Shameless rip-off, I would say, but thank you.
Mhm. No, not at all. It's brilliant. I like any cultural references like that. Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And I think it's also a really good jumping off point for creativity because the reason I wrote that this morning
Mm,
is because I sat here and I was like, ugh, I'm tired. Because I am very tired at the moment. And I can't think of words or ideas or anything. And so I was just, and then from nowhere, the Fresh Prince popped into my head. And I was like, well, I've got a workshop that I'm running next week about writing with rhythm. And let's turn the Fresh Prince's rap into a thing that can sell my workshop. And so that is where that came from.
exactly. My problem is too many ideas. I sort of train myself as a kind of ideas ninja since the age of probably about 7. So, uh, and I have all manner of methods, some of which I teach as well. I think everyone has the ability to be creative. But if I would say one thing, if you think you're not creative, it's this: the number two, two-ness. So if you can take two things, two frames of reference, two ideas at random almost, and clash them like two pieces of flint, you could
Mm.
get a spark, you could get an explosion, or you could get burnt. It doesn't matter. But it needs to come from two completely different frames of reference. So what you did there was a perfect example of that. You took Fresh Prince and you took your workshop, your micro workshop for next week, threw them together, result, creativity, a witty post. So that was a brilliant instance of a bit of lateral thinking on your part.
Thanks. Yeah, I love that about creative because I'm going to just go back to what you said about people who think they're not creative. It's like, are you a human? Yes, then you are
Yeah,
creative because that's literally what our brains are evolved to do is to be creative and problem solve and problem solving. And people always think of creativity as just being like painting or poetry or dancing. And it's like, no, engineers are creative, scientists are
really.
creative, politicians are sometimes creative to a bloody fault. And it's yeah, and so like we are all creative. It's like if you solve a problem ever, that's a creative moment.
And not only if you solve a problem, if you see an opportunity, if you see what others miss. For me,
Yes.
that is the essence of it. So you could look, for example, you could see an apple, let's say on a tree. Now, person A sees an apple. Person B might see trapped sunlight. They
Mm.
might see a future tree. They might see a symbol of original sin. Um, so the key is the lens. It's how you see things. So you can turn the mundane, the ordinary, into the extraordinary just with a reframe, a shift in looking at something sideways,
Yeah, or
possibly
turning an idea on its head and being like,
like
what's
this.
that? Yeah, like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or taking an idea that you and like this is why I think debate club should be a thing in schools as well. Like children should be taught to debate because you should have
Agreed.
to take the opposing view from what you agree with and then try and argue for it because that is like a whole source of exciting new insights and points of view. And it's like if you have to argue for something you vehemently disagree with, I think that's a really powerful way to understand where you come from and like how
A-
you understand
a-
them.
Absolutely. It's very healthy. It's an act of intellectual empathy. So, in putting yourself in the shoes of someone else, someone with whom you may disagree, it could help. Now, eh, that mere act of looking at something from someone else's point of view can avoid a lot of all the mudslinging that one sees in the world today. because it's perfectly okay to disagree with someone. And funny enough, debating is one of the reasons why I am now doing what I'm doing, because I was in the debating club. We got into the national final of the debating competition. I think it was run by the Independent when I was at school. And we ended up being beaten in the final against the Ladies' College, Cheltenham Ladies' College. But what they used to do is you'd be given a subject, and as you say, you have to then argue for that motion, and you might not agree. I mean, I had one. The EU is merely the United States of Europe, and I had to argue with it, and I didn't agree with it, but I can see the merit of that argument from their point of view, so I can put that hat on, then take it off. And it's also helped me riff, which is what I like doing, and speak on subjects and not exactly know where I'm going to end the sentence, or indeed this sentence.
Yes. Yeah, it's really important. Like, I don't know. And I think creativity is all a part of that as well, because I don't know how we've got here. Like, well, I kind of do know how we've got here, but we've got to this point where you can't even have a conversation with somebody who disagrees with your kind of faction, because if you do, you're cast out and just seen. And it's like, that's so dangerous, because we don't have to agree. Like, there are people with abhorrent views. Like, I am never going to argue somebody's right to exist with somebody. Having said that, it's really useful to understand where those people are coming from, because you're never going to change their minds if you don't understand at all where they're coming from. And quite often it doesn't come from a place of like, I hate this human being. It comes from a place of like having been told stories that aren't true, and all of this other stuff. And like, you've got to understand where they've come from in order to be able to change anything. And we've got to this place where you can't even have a conversation about it anymore, because people are like, oh, I'm going to cancel you because you're talking to that person, and that person's like, air quotes, evil. And it's just so difficult.
Agreed. And this is, of course, where I think reading helps, and literature, because it enables you to vicariously live and see the world through the eyes of someone else or a character. And much of what I know has come from literature, from reading, from poetry, or whatever. And I think that's very important, is to see things from other people's point of view. I mean, for example, you're talking about the art of debate, or if you think of someone like Socrates, the Socratic method, what is it? It's about arriving at the truth through questions and answers. And it's not about necessarily beating someone in a debate with point scoring. It's about trying to arrive at the truth, which you may admit you don't know. So together with the person with whom you're debating, you're then trying to arrive at a better definition of terms, or whatever it is. And I always find that's a better, healthier way of looking at it, rather than I'm right, you're wrong, adversarial. It's a boxing match, which always ends up being, in Latin argumentum, ad hominem, attacking the man, not the ball.
Somebody ends up bleeding.
Yeah, exactly. And that's always an intellectual cul-de-sac.
It is. It really is. It's. I don't know. I had another thought then, but it skittered out of my head.
That's all right. If it runs past,
no.
I'll tell it where to go.
No, I remember now. So yeah, you were talking about literature and storytelling being. I am currently reading Elif Shafak. Is one of my favorite authors. Like, I love her work. There's only one book of hers that I haven't been able to really get started on, and I think that was one of her earlier ones, and I don't think the translation was very good. I prefer the ones that she writes in English. But yeah, I'm reading at the moment The Island of Missing Trees. And I don't know if you've read it, but it's about Cyprus in the 1970s. And like, all I knew about Cyprus before I read this book was that it was very divided. North was Turkish, south was Greek, and there was a lot of, there was basically a civil war, and there was terrible. A bit like, not wildly dissimilar to what happened in Ireland and the Troubles, and they called it Troubles as well. And I didn't really know anything about it, but it's a love story between a Turkish girl and a Greek boy, and the background to the whole thing. And it's also told from the point of view of a fig tree, which is like, really,
I love that.
It's beautiful. It's such a beautiful book, but it's just given me this incredible insight into, a sliver of the history of Cyprus, and that kind of animosity, and how politics can just poison communities and relationships, and how the Greeks and Turks used to live together very happily, and then But yeah, and it's just, but that was such a good example of, yeah, being able to step into a different world, just as a visitor, and just be able to like get some kind of understanding as to what's going on there, and how the people feel, because it's all, you hear about big kind of geopolitical stuff, and it's all very
Mm.
abstract, but like hearing about it from the point of view of a real person or a real character is so powerful.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. I mean, these sort of weighty political ideas, they're very difficult to understand sometimes. But when you see these are stories being played out, these ideas have consequences
Mm.
people's lives every day, these big ideas. Yeah, my dad actually had a lot of Cypriot friends, Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot, and my father, who's Iranian, he ran a Greek restaurant at one point, which he inherited from a Cypriot called Mokos Tomatos. I kid you not, who was it is a very curious man. He slightly dodgy, really. He was in a car accident and he didn't hurt himself. However, he wore a neck brace for 3 years in order to get insurance money, compensation. He was perfectly okay, but I used to see him in town with this massive white thing on. There goes Marcus Tomatos. And the irony is, 3 years later, he took it off, and what happened? He had a terrible neck.
I bet he did, yeah, because he wasn't using any of his muscles, right?
Exactly. And he got no compensation. So
Oh my
uh,
God.
let that be a lesson to us. I don't know why, but Marcos Tomatos. Yeah, and what a beautiful concept. I rather love ideas like that from the point of view of inanimate, which is animate, it's a living thing, but inanimate things. I think it The History of the World from 10.5 chapters, Julian Barnes. I think was it he wrote it from the point of view of, was it an insect? I can't remember quite, but on Noah's Ark. But one of
Oh,
the stories is written from the point of view of, I think it's like an insect or possibly a beetle, which is an insect.
yeah.
But that's a device that appeals to me.
Oh,
Um,
you should totally have a look then. And I can't remember her name now, so this is not going to be very useful. But a French woman who was she was a massive fan of hot air ballooning, like right at the beginning, and when hot air balloons were first kind of invented. And she was also an actress, and she was basically a scandal in a time when women were supposed to get married and have children, and she was like absolutely not to all of that. But she was asked by I think a newspaper to write like an account of her air ballooning trip, and she was like, "Well, that sounds boring as shit." So she did it, but she did it from the point of view of the chair that she sat in. So it was the chair
oh, I
that
love
was
it.
writing the book. And I was just like, that was such an interesting idea. Like back then, like there was a couple of
Indeed.
years ago. It was, yeah, just really, I love the idea of writing from the point of view of an inanimate object.
I do as well. And funny enough, it's a technique I teach with public speaking and content is personification.
Mm,
Um, Particularly if you have a brand or I don't know, service you sell, to try and to see what it might look like from the point of view of an inanimate object. So um, let's say in your case, which is helping people write and bring their book to fruition. Imagine something from the point of view of a pencil or a pen or a keyboard. If I were a keyboard, there's only one person I want to work with, and that's you. If I were a pen, I'd want, someone to help me be able to write beautiful words, and that's you. So if imagine, all the pencils of the world, all the pens the converging on Hereford, an exodus of pens marching and pencils. That's a little example at the top of my head, is that you use something inanimate to get across a USB, which in your case is working with people and finding their voice and telling their story. Um, it's something I actually do teach my students and clients,
yeah. Yeah.
and something I use myself.
That's a really cool idea, because one of the things that I get people to do sometimes is like, just as a creative writing prompt, is like write the biography of your table lamp, or write the
Oh, brilliant.
biography of your rug, or something like that. And the possibilities are endless for that kind of thing. And it's just a way to be silly, and you never know what might pop out of it.
It's also a technique I used in advertising as a copywriter for big agencies. So what you do is you become something inanimate, as I say. So for example, I don't know, let's say butter, say. and bread, you're advertising some kind of brand of butter. So you animate the butter, you anthropomorphize the butter, and it will. You imagine the butter walking along with legs and trying to find your bread. So it's quite a creative exercise. And what you're doing really is, again, it's empathy. It's creative empathy, though. So you're putting yourself in the mind or into something else, into a lamp, into whatever happens to be a plant, and that mere act of doing that will creates that smile in the mind, so people will see the ordinary as
Mm.
the extraordinary. So that will enable you to make people sit up and lean in to what you do, because you're not just saying, oh, I do X, Y, and Z. You are showing them, making them laugh, and evoking some emotion in them.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do, right? With all writing and with
Yeah,
all creativity, is we're trying to make somebody feel something.
absolutely.
Mm.
And this is a really well, it's not quite a simple way of doing so, and it's fun. So
Yeah, it really is fun. It really is fun. Oh, I love talking about creativity because it's just boundless, but it's also and here's the thing that we can talk about as well. I'd like to get your take on this.
yeah,
I often or I see like there's a trope that creative people are like, oh, super messy and no boundaries and we can do whatever we want and no. And I actually think that's really unhelpful because if you tell me to write like if you tell me to write a story about anything, it's too
yeah,
big. And so you
it's
need
too
you
big.
need boundaries. And so what I really enjoy about creative exercises is when somebody will give me some like you just said, like imagine that you're a pat of butter and that you need to find your destiny or whatever it is. And that suddenly, and you might end up doing something completely different, but having those constraints means that you're free then to play with it.
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Mm.
The constraints liberate you. And the worst thing you can do is to say to someone, look, here's a pencil or a pen, go away, you can do anything, hey, we can be really creative and do anything, and you end up doing nothing.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like, say, the sonnet is um 14 lines, of course, the Petrarch and the Shakespearean, and it has a very strict structure, yet within those confines Shakespeare can write what he did, or Petrarch, or Milton. So it is a paradox. Sometimes limits can free.
Mm. Yeah, for
Um, but,
sure.
but when you're given carte blanche, when you say go away, be creative, and it's always bad. I remember at school, let's brainstorm, and of course there's no focus to it, and
Yeah.
you just end up, and it ends up going down the old channels of thought, those habits.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say, right, we've got to, you and I now, we've got to come up with an idea. It's got to be about fences, say, because we're talking about fences. How can we use what stories can we tell with fences? How can we use the fence as a metaphor for something? What a fence is, what does it feel like, to feel a fence? What would a fence think, for example?
Yeah.
Um, what are they for? What is the purpose of a fence? Uh, so yeah, absolutely. Limits can be your friend, and constraints.
Limits are definitely my friend. Definitely my friend.
Yeah. Having
Okay.
said that, I am very disorganized. I am very messy. It externally, internally, I'm fairly disciplined in that I know, well, I can, if I need a fact, I know where to find it.
Mm.
But yeah, organization is a big problem with me. And actually, I think that's probably something you can help. I know you're very creative, but you could help people with if they have that idea and they want to then transmute that idea into a book.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I that's kind of one of my superpowers, I guess, is like you wouldn't necessarily. My husband says that I have a horizontal filing system whereby I just like use every available surface as a filing
And that's interesting.
cabinet, which must be, I mean, it drives me nuts, so it must drive him up the wall as well. But yeah, one of the things that I seem to be able to do is look at somebody's like messy, first draft and be able to kind of go, yeah, I can see how this can fit together. And it's like boom, 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 like take this, take this, take this, let's organize it this way. And I don't know, yeah, it's an interesting thing because I am very disorganized also. I have a lot of structures in place to help me be less disorganized, including my VA, Carolyn. And I've got a lot of notebooks and things that I use. But in some ways, I'm so disorganized. Like without all of those structures, I would just be an absolute I would just be an absolute flannel. But yeah, for some reason, I can take somebody else's mess and turn it into something that works. I don't know why I can't do that with my own mess at home. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
I
interesting.
think you're creatively organized, if that makes sense. So it's a bit like a conductor, and you've got have these instruments and colors and so forth, and you can arrange them into a symphony. But that is actually creative. People think, oh, organization is the opposite, the antithesis of creativity. There's an example of when the two are one, really.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think most people really fundamentally don't understand what creativity is, you know.
I
I
think you're right. I think experts who claim to understand it, write books on it, they don't understand it. It's like jazz, really.
yeah, nobody. Oh, quantum physics. Like nobody understands
Yes,
quantum physics.
exactly. The creative Schrodinger's cat. I wonder what that would look like in a box.
Yes.
Probably
Schrodinger's idea, Schrodinger's pencil. Yeah, it's it.
E- exactly. Or you open the box and the cat's playing the jazz saxophone or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would look like, but no, you're right. It's one of those things. It's very difficult to say what it is. Having said that, I've read a brilliant book, and I do recommend it. And now, of course, it's gone out of my mind, but it's called The Act of Creation, and
Oh, I think that's on my
Arthur
book.
Kessler. Arthur Kessler. It just reminded me, and he writes beautifully. Anyway, he's a novelist as well, and it it delves into what the act of creation is,
Okay.
and he comes up with this idea called by association, so like association, but with by, so two,
Yeah.
and essentially that's what I was getting at earlier. And he says you take two matrices or matrices and you then put them together. And the result can be humor, it can be creativity, it can be an idea. But that's one thing, that two-ness, that much creativity has in common. And that's rather interesting when you take one thing and combine it in some shape or form with another. So that's what I teach my students is that taking those two flints and then putting them together and
Yeah.
seeing what happens. Random entry, randomness, chance helps as well,
Yeah.
uh, because the human mind cannot deal with chance. It will always connect to
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
You
We
know, if
create patterns.
exactly. So I've got a specimen of a huntsman spider just out of shot here, as one does.
Yeah.
So if I take spider and now I take book, so now we think, okay, book, spider, what's like a book and a spider, an 8-page book, say, or a book with venom. I don't know what that would look like. So you're taking two things, and that's already it's enabling me to jump out of, to escape that concept prison, to smash open the door and look at it in a new way. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
it,
I
it
think
can be done.
it can be done. Yeah. And people need to let go of their need to be like perfectionism is an absolute
Oh yeah,
creative killer. And just this idea that, and this is what school does. And I don't want to go on a rant about schools, but I might. And it's like you should only put your hand up if you've got the right answer. And that's like such a contrast to how they do it in Japan, which is like everybody is happy to put their hands up and get the wrong answer and nobody gets sneered at. But in this country, it's certainly in my education, I don't know how things have changed. If they have, I don't think they have wildly. It's like nobody wants to
I
get the wrong
agree.
answer. You don't put your hand up unless you know the answer. And so there's no opportunity for anyone to grow or get used to the idea that it's okay to be wrong, because like this idea that you can't ever be wrong or change your mind, we have to have all of the answers right now, and we have to create something that's like really good. And it's like, no, you've got to be able to do something shit first, because otherwise nothing good will ever happen.
I agree. It's a difference between vertical and lateral thinking. In vertical thinking, you've got to be right at every step. You
Yeah.
know, step one leads to step two, logic. But in lateral thinking, you can enter at any point. You can be wrong and use that wrong thing as a stepping stone. So, I can say, I don't know, for example, clouds have their own means of propulsion. They have propellers. I know that's wrong.
Yeah.
But hey, I like the fact now I can riff on that. It's okay, what if clouds did migrate like birds? What if they did, you know, um, gather in flocks and have little propellers or something or other? So you can use something wrong and then be right later. It doesn't need to be right to begin with. So you
Yeah.
can use your wrong, funny enough, as a sort of catapult to get you to something that's right.
Yeah.
And I actually like being wrong. Um, if I were a teacher, I'd say I want only wrong answers. I only want the silliest, most absurd answers you can come up with. Right
Yeah,
answers are wrong.
yeah, I love
That's
that.
what I like to do if I were a teacher.
Yeah, wrong answers only. That's always fun. Maybe, maybe
Exactly.
maybe we leave people with yeah, with a little exercise that is go and go and write a short piece about something you can see in your room, but wrong answers only.
Brilliant. Yep, absolutely. Only wrong answers.
Yeah,
You know, how can you be wrong? And there's humor in being wrong as well, deliberately wrong, getting
yeah,
something wrong, seeing something the wrong way. Um, what is wrong anyway? Sometimes wrong is just right, but it's not, being looked at in the right way.
yeah. There's very few absolutes. I think humans like to work in absolutes, don't they? And it's
Yeah. It's
not
so
the way
much
the world
simpler.
works. Yeah,
Exactly. It's sometimes because I tend to like opposites and the marriage of opposites and stuff, but people find that hard to get their head around, particularly in the West, where it's uh, black, white, fast, slow.
yeah,
Um, but you're right. I'm not talking about moral absolutes here. I'm talking about conceptual absolutes,
yes, exactly,
should we
exactly.
say?
Well, I think that's a good place to leave it. Go and write a
Yeah.
little piece about a thing you can see in your room, wrong answers only. And yeah, where can people find more about you, Alex?
About me, well, I'm on LinkedIn. I teach a persuasion course, how to be um, to light up a room, own a spotlight, how to sell without selling, how to find. Well, it's a bit of a weird Venn diagram. It's like psychology plus showbiz plus advertising creativity. So you put them all together, put it into a blender, out comes a smoothie, which I think can really help people tell their story on their terms.
I think so.
So,
Your LinkedIn content is top notch, so thoroughly recommend that.
well, I never know what I'm going to do with it next. It could be a song, it could be anything. So tune
Well,
in.
that makes it
So
fun. Yeah, go tune
yeah,
in. And you,
and your book as well. Your
yeah, oh
book,
yeah.
your
So
workshop.
I have written 4 books, but the one that the one that's the most fun is Don't Eat the Frog, because
Yeah,
that came out of me being really pissed off just with the is just another piece of LinkedIn bro advice that's touted as being the only right
yeah.
answer. It's like always eat the frog first, and it's like that's never worked for me. It's never worked for me, and it's been a great source of shame. And so that was the jumping off point. I was like, why am I supposed to eat the frog first? And I ended up writing a whole little micro book about um what to do if you are a person with a brain who just defies advice like eat the frog, and how can you harness your creative not harness it, but how can you ride your creativity into like deep joy and writing and all of that if your brain is like an ADHD brain. And so that's where that book came from, and it's just full of little bits and pieces that people can take or leave, like try this piece of advice, try that piece of advice, maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but it's just a little bit of a different way of thinking about writing advice and productivity advice rather than the usual sad stuff that's out there.
Indeed, it's like a micro version of your mind.
Yeah,
It's charming, creative, and doesn't tell you what to do, how to think. It's the antithesis, the antidote to all the bro marketer nonsense.
yeah,
If you are, wired a bit differently, if you do see the world a bit differently. And I think it shows the importance of questioning assumptions, particularly with all the advice we're given. Do this, do that. Well, what if that doesn't work for you?
yeah,
And
including questioning the stuff that I wrote in that book. It's like, try it. If it doesn't work for you, try something else.
exactly, don't eat the frog, maybe take the frog to dinner,
Yes,
why not?
definitely
Why
take the frog
not?
to dinner. I'm vegetarian, so I won't be eating any frogs anytime soon. Yeah.
Exactly. So all that advice is just essentially a cliche, and people sort of nod sagely when you say it. But if you, as you did, you unpacked it, you actually thought, well, is there any merit to this notion of not eating frogs? And for you, there wasn't. So result a book and I think this speaks to a lot of people, because and a lot of this stuff goes unquestioned. And I
It
think
does.
it
It's
should
just
be questioned.
thought terminating cliches are find their home on LinkedIn. It's just like, oh, here is a piece of
Yeah.
top psychology wisdom that is, and it's like, and you look at it and it's like, is it though, or is it bullshit?
Yes, exactly. Mer del Toro. Yeah, it is, and there's unpopular opinion, and it's
Oh, yeah.
neither unpopular nor often is it an opinion.
No, or hot take, and it's like, this is
Oh,
lukewarm
hot
at
take.
best.
Yes.
Lukewarm at best.
Absolutely, lukewarm takes and hot. Oh, it does drive me mad. And what further drives me mad is the fact that a lot of people buy this stuff, and you see the likes, and they appear to be living this, well, a lifestyle I wouldn't want, frankly. But been making a lot of money and so forth. And why do people fall for it? I don't know. I don't know.
It's odd, isn't
Uh,
it? It's odd. I think it's because people, I can't remember who said, I think it was Dan Kennedy said, people are just wandering around with, an umbilical cord looking for somewhere to plug it into, to be told what to think, what to do, what to, how to behave. And I don't
yeah.
think that's I think that's depressing, but kind of accurate. So.
I think if some people undoubtedly they've got they want a spoon and to be spoon fed. They want to be that sort of, it's like Wally,
Yeah.
when in the future with the flying about, eating, just consume. And I think yes, that is probably human nature, is to take the path of least resistance.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
we did evolve to save energy, and on my tiredest days, I can see the appeal of that. But on like 90% of the rest of the time, I'm like, no, man, what a boring way to live. Like, no.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I defy that evolution if we are supposed to be like that. So I don't want to be trapped by those patterns.
No, energy saving doesn't mean that necessarily. It means do less of do less housework, do less admin,
Yeah,
more creative things.
exactly. Get a Roomba. Get
I
a
would love
Roomba.
that.
That's what I say. Exactly.
Right, and on that note, Alex, thank you very much. This has been
No,
epic.
not at all. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a delight.
And yeah, you can find Alex on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my book on Amazon, and I'm sure we'll do this
Right.
again. So I'm
Exactly.
excited now.